Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info coming at you from the conclusion of the second now Cup Series race at the Nashville Super Speedway. Chase Elliott, unofficially your winner, pending the results of post-race technical inspection. A race that went well past its scheduled time, at least, almost past its scheduled distance. If we were going to have one more caution there at the end of it there. But Chase Elliott pulling off his second victory of the season and taking the overall point lead from Ross Chastain and the other two-time winners this year. So we have that one already started up here for this. So I'm sure the Chase Elliott fans very happy about that. Those of his teammates, though, may not be. The last place finisher, pending, of course, the results of post-race inspection, was Alex Bowman, involved in an incident with Corey LaJoie before the longest 2-hour delay of the afternoon here. Bowman involved in an accident that put him into the outside wall driver's side first. Thankfully, he's okay. But unfortunately, the 48 car was not. After several repairs attempted on pit road, they went behind the wall, eliminated from the race under the damaged vehicle policy. This is Bowman's first last place finish since July of 2018 at Kentucky, a track that's no longer even on the circuit anymore. And Bowman, his first last place finish since taking over the number 48 car as well, that won at Kentucky, was back in the number 88 car. But this time around, again, of course, his teammate Chase Elliott, your winner. Kyle Busch, another driver that's not going to be too happy with the results of this. The pedigree car, it had, I believe, 63 previous starts in the Cup Series back to 1993. Probably had the best run that it's really had in recent years. Leading a number of laps there. Unfortunately, not the right strategy at the end. 2 tires or 4 tires was just not the place that you needed to be for a lot of the other competitors there. Unfortunately, couldn't climb far enough up the rankings. Kyle Busch showing back in I was looking back here, the 21st position here. Given, however, the struggles that they had at Sears Point, where all 4 of the Joe Gibbs Racing teammates pitted in the closing laps in a desperation move, perhaps anticipating a last-minute caution that did not happen when Daniel Suarez took his first victory. This time around, all 4 of the Gibbs cars at one point or another were factors in this one. Kyle led a good portion of the race. Truex looked very good with his stage win. Christopher Bell was a factor for part of it, and of course Denny was on the pole after rain cut short qualifying the other day. All of them seemed like they were going to have a pretty good shot at it. Bell kind of dropped off the pace later in the race there. Then Truex on the wrong strategy as well, him back in the 22nd spot. And things not quite turning out that well. Christopher Bell actually finishing in the 8th spot there, 2 spots behind Denny Hamlin, so able to salvage something in the final running order, but neither of them pulling off the victory. Kurt Busch in the 2nd spot there, Ryan Blaney in 3rd, Kyle Larson in 4th, Ross Chastain in the 5th spot, debuting the new sponsorship from Jockey. Denny Hamlin in 6th, Austin Cindric 7th, Christopher Bell in the 8th spot, Joey Logano 9th, and Kevin Harvick in 10th. So we await the results of post-race technical inspection. Don't know if it'll take longer or less time with the delays that we had today. We will be doing trivia later tonight. I also have some more die-casts to show you after our show and tell segment last week for our Knoxville show. Went very well. Seemed like you guys enjoyed that, so I got more of that for you guys tonight. And no shortage of stuff to talk about between the top 3 series for the Xfinity series and the Truck series as well. I want to also give a particular bit of thanks to our William Saki that covers the ARCA series. He did some bonus coverage in Elko this past week. I posted his article on the lastcar.info page during the delay. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I highly recommend you check it there. He did some very good work there at the track and even took some great pictures of the bottom 5, and we all got that up on there as well. The Cup article that will follow later tonight, if it's Bowman or otherwise, will be up later this evening for those of you night owls out there. And we'll kind of go from there. So, that was kind of a different situation. I guess the first thing to definitely talk about from this race here is the broadcast. And of course, I've been very outspoken on that subject. And I know many of you have been waiting very much to, see what NBC's response to what has undoubtedly been very much of an off year for Fox this year. And that very much continued in the Truck Series broadcast too. I think generally, again, there's 2 big pieces of it. You got the direction, you got the kind of with the graphics and where the camera's pointed and all that. and you got the play-by-play in the broadcast booth and all that. I would say on the direction side of this, this was a very well covered race from that aspect. We had first and foremost the way that certain moments weren't missed, and even to a degree that something I haven't even really talked about in the video is like the effectiveness of some of the replays that are shown as well. The replays of the Chase Briscoe and Ty Dillon accident, for example, it wasn't satisfactory enough to just show the accident, and they did a pretty good job of showing the wreck itself in real time, but also doing an onboard shot and changing during the onboard to show each of the hits, to show that the 14 car actually got hit by Ty Dillon several times in that impact, and perhaps explained the fact that he went behind the wall. Also with Chase Briscoe, the fact that they actually showed him go behind the wall during a commercial break and during green flag racing, something that Fox notoriously misses. Cars going in and out of the garage area or having problems at one point or another, something that very rarely gets seen. We even saw it at the end of the race today with the caution that Josh Bilicki had at the very end of the race with the engine failure and him getting, rolling behind the wall there. That's the kind of thing that I like to look out for when I'm working trackside, because you usually don't see that on the broadcast. I thought a lot of the graphics were very helpful. I liked that they had a graphic that showed that Alex Bowman's crash clock had expired and showed that he was out of the race. I still think it would be better to have a clock set up on the leaderboard for anybody that's on it, because we know that there is some kind of starting and stopping point. I think if they had somebody that could keep track of that and actually show like which drivers are on it and how close they are to it, it would really help. I think it would help, their own staff be able to keep on top of that and show when somebody was out. But I think it was definitely a step in the right direction to actually have an indication that somebody had dropped out. We'd seen this in the past with NBC where they showed like if somebody had a pit road speeding penalty or something like that, or if they were black flagged for any other reason, that would show up in a graphic as well. So I'm glad that that was expanded on. I don't seem to recall the thing with the DVP last year. So I think that's a positive step in the right direction. Could be particularly helpful when we get to some of these races where you do have a lot more damage that's inflicted on these cars, especially like a super speedway. And also, I think maybe perhaps doesn't get used as often because these cars have been as durable as they have been. Of course, we saw Briscoe and Ty Dillon escape the crash clock before Briscoe ended up going behind the wall for several more laps there afterwards. I thought the graphics were very helpful. I liked during green flag pit stops that there was an indication that when somebody was on pit road, even if they didn't have a shot of it, you had an indication of who was filtering on pit road. Once they knew how many tires the person was taking, that they had that indicated on there. They showed the amount of times. I thought that was done pretty well. I thought that was good. I thought there's other examples of it too. I'm trying to think of them offhand, but I think in general, a lot of that was good. The camera angles, I don't think there was a significant difference from Fox in terms of the angles that were used. I didn't sense that we had a lot of ones that were sitting on the wall and just watching the cars rush by. It seemed like a lot more of the angles were from the infield. I'm glad they had somebody staged at the entrance of pit road so you could see somebody make an unscheduled stop. I thought that was a good show. I think again, infield cameras really capture the action a lot better because you're just not going to see it as well from the outfield or on top of the grandstands or from a fixed position. I think that was a good setup there, and it seemed like the commentators were certainly plugged into that as well. I mean, when there was an accident, Dale Jr. was just on the button as quickly as any time he has in the past, and directing people's attention to accidents. I know there were some concerns that they were a bit over the top in responding to the accidents, but I kind of rewatched a couple of those clips, and I didn't see anything that was too extreme, at least in this particular case. Certainly not compared to some other examples, even from last year. But I like the leaderboard. I think the leaderboard is fine. I thought sometimes it's a little difficult to figure out who's running at the back of the field. I missed the start of this race here because I didn't think they were going to start it, frankly, with the rain and the weather coming in there. I anticipated there was going to be a pretty good lightning hold from the beginning of the race. Obviously didn't turn out happening until about 40 laps into it. So it was tricky to kind of figure that out, but I know that that's not a reason that everybody's going to be watching the races, so I can't really fault them on that. But what I will say is that I don't think in the play-by-play there was a significant improvement from the booth, while at least not in every aspect. I do think there was definitely an improvement in the fact that it was treated with some professionalism, that it was a bit more that you were approaching it as a sport. There wasn't a bunch of goofy segments or anything like that. I liked that there was an effort to really inform people about what was happening. And also the technicality, the technical aspect of the cars. I think that was another thing that was a massive improvement, and especially on the graphical department, and really showing Steve Letarte having a role in this too. The way in which we actually saw, the whole process that a single lug, is engaged and disengaged on these wheels. Where on earth was that earlier this year? I mean, we've had examples of it where you kind of get a little bit of an idea of it. And yes, Larry McReynolds would describe this as best as he could. But to actually have a graphical representation or a clear, I mean, this is the first thing I'd ever heard about this red button that pops up and indicates that the wheel is actually locked into place. I never heard about that. Maybe I just missed it. It's entirely possible. But that shouldn't have been something that was missable, because I think that that would have really informed any discussion about how these teams are missing engaging these lug nuts and letting these wheels come off, and how much of a situation there. So I thought that was excellent. I thought it really showed that I think that's where Steve Letarte needs to be, is kind of in the Larry McReynolds position of just doing the technical analysis. I think that he's really good at informing that side of it. But I was certainly wondering, it's like, why am I just now hearing about this? This should have been there from the very beginning of the year at the Clash. And really, honestly, maybe critical of my own coverage of that, because I could have gone over there and seen one of these teams and said, hey, how does this work? And how does that work? And, is there, can you show me like how the wheel engages on there? One thing that they actually had back at the Clash is they actually had a display set up on the track during a track walk there, where fans could pick up one of the new air guns and test putting on the lug nut, or at least test what it felt like to engage it on there. I don't know if the magnet just kept the nut on there so you could at least kind of get the feel of it. I don't know if it actually engaged it on there. I didn't try it myself. But it would have been great if they had like some kind of an example. I felt that that was really lacking back in February. And it would have been nice to actually talk with one of these teams and see the nuances of these cars. I expected there was going to be like a display car outside, and maybe all the media could like crawl all over it and kind of look under it and look around it and get inside it and kind of understand all these aspects, because so much had changed with these cars and with these wheels. And to see that there was these added details that got revealed in just a segment today here at the end of June, with half the season completed already. This shouldn't have been news. This should have been done quite a while ago, and it should have been done just the way they did it. It would have been ideally, you would have had it in a really well-lit place, kind of like when ESPN, like even the new ESPN I wasn't a big fan of, but Tim Brewer's segments, he had like a well-lit room with physical representations of the cars, and you could actually see stuff really clearly, and he would very methodically explain all that. I think something like that, where you could see it in real life and how that nut engages and how precise it has to be, it would have informed any discussion this year about all these loose wheels and what's been missed, and if it's something that these teams need to figure out. I feel like I have a much better understanding of that now than I had the entire first part of the year. So that was excellent. And again, it makes me even more critical of the Fox portion of the broadcast for not tackling that, because I think that could have very easily been done, and especially at the beginning of the year. I think the Clash broadcast, especially as an exhibition race, would have been a perfect opportunity to do a whole lot of technical features and really talk about these cars more comprehensively, and really set something like that up. But I think the effort was much more on the spectacle of the cars running the track, rather than understanding that these were new cars. We never really had that. And again, I feel critical of my own role in that, because I was there and I could have done something like that too. Maybe not, the big teams I'm sure probably wouldn't have been, but maybe one of the small teams would have been more eager to do something like that. Maybe like a video to show like all these little features of it. Obviously it's old hat at this point, and I'm sure other people have tried things like that. But you got that aspect too. But this leads me to more the broadcast booth. In part 3 of my NASCAR broadcast, terrible broadcast series, or the broadcast problem series, rather, I was very critical of the NBC broadcast, where they constantly shout over the top of each other, because Rick Allen doesn't have a firm presence in the booth as the main play-by-play guy in the way that an Eli Gold or a Bob Jenkins or a Barney Hall, even when we're talking about radio circles there, would. And so everybody else is trying to be the play-by-play guy. I still sensed they had this, and I was nervous about it coming into this understanding that they were going to have Rick Allen, and they're going to have Steve Letarte, and they're going to have Dale Jr., and they're going to have Jeff Burton, and they're all going to be in the booth, and they're all going to be basically trying to do the play-by-play at the same time. It seemed like they still split them off in a couple of groups. That you had one that had Steve Letarte and Rick Allen, and they're kind of talking to each other, and then you had another group a little ways away, and you had Junior and Jeff Burton, and they're talking to each other. But it just made it seem to me that you could probably pare that down to maybe just two people. Pick your best two, and then just do that. I know that some people were suggesting maybe just take Jeff Burton out of the equation because he kind of feels like the third wheel. But I think you probably could reduce it even more. I think maybe trying something like that. Maybe something where it's just, I don't know, Steve Letarte and Dale Jr. or something like that. I mean, I still feel that the broadcast was, they had to fill like every space in the broadcast with, just noise, just saying something. And there's this guy saying this and this guy saying that. And it's just, they're all shouting out over the top of each other. And I don't, there were some times where it seemed like they had a little bit less to say, and they kind of ran out of steam a little bit in the second half of the broadcast, especially once they got back from the rain delay. But it still was too many people. I think they're still tripping over each other. And I thought it was really absurd when we got back in the Xfinity broadcast, and you had the external booth where you had Dale Jr. or Dale Jarrett rather, and Brad Daugherty, who again are both excellent at what they do. But Jarrett in particular was just shouting over everything. And it's like, I almost got the sense that he was kind of cued into it. It sounded like it was getting kind of uncomfortable for him to raise his voice that much. And I get that he's sitting on the pit box that's out on the track and you have more ambient noise, but he's been in that position before and hasn't yelled to that level. It sounded like it was getting kind of difficult for him after a while. And Brad Daugherty really wasn't doing it as much. I think, Brad was much more at a kind of reasonable level there. So again, it's too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to broadcast. I still think we're missing a lot of elements that make a good play-by-play. I think there's not enough. It's going to take somebody to take the wheel, and NBC's going to have to figure this out at some point. They may have to facilitate doing it. They're going to have to pick somebody as the main play-by-play guy. I think Rick Allen's been positioned in that way as somebody that has that repertoire, but I don't believe he's asserted himself as well as he has in the Truck Series. I didn't see any indication of that from tonight's broadcast. I heard a lot of Junior. I heard a ton of Steve Letarte. I thought he probably had more of a presence than anybody else in this, just because he's so much louder than everybody. I don't know in terms of content-wise outside of the technical side if he was really that good with the play-by-play. And then Jeff Burton, I don't know. I think he got kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit. I think it was not as conducive to the rest of the broadcast there, which is unfortunate because I think Jeff Burton does a good job. I think when he was out, when they do the Watkins Glen broadcast and they're in different corners, I thought he did a decent job with that. Same thing with Dale Jr. and all that. So NBC is going to have to figure this out. They're going to have to figure out places to put people. And I sense that they're starting to do that. I noticed what they did, one of the big things that was noticeable certainly in this broadcast was what they're doing with Rutledge Wood. I have admittedly not been the biggest Rutledge Wood fan because I think that a lot of his segments are just kind of unnecessary. But, he's a guy that really enjoys kind of going out there and mingling with people and doing kind of the, what's in the area. And they kind of harness that where now he's like doing stuff around the area and featuring other locations and all that. And that was, I thought, kind of nice. I mean, I'm not sure how much of a race fan necessarily Rutledge Wood is, and if it bothers him that he's not really at the track, or I don't know when these segments are recorded. I assume they're earlier in the weekend, or maybe, I don't know if they're on the same day as the race. We saw this back in the Clash earlier this year where they were doing stuff around LA and him and Dale Jr., but it wasn't concurrent with the race. It was like earlier in the weekend. But I think, he seemed to enjoy, doing a lot of that and mingling with people and going to these different places. And I think, if he's having a good time and all that, I'm not going to really fault him on that. I don't really watch a lot of the pre-race segments. I think a lot of that is kind of unnecessary. I think post-race stuff is where the focus kind of should be. But maybe that's a good place. I'll be interested to see week to week how they're able to maintain this, especially we go to places like Road America, or maybe the places aren't as famous as like the Tootsie's Bar or the downtown and all that. What places are they going to send him to there? And I guess that could be kind of a fun thing. Benny Parsons used to do segments like that way back when for the old ESPN, but then that would be done earlier in the week and he'd still be broadcasting from the track. I don't think Rutledge Wood fits as much into the booth dynamic there. But maybe they found a good place to put him. And my point in hammering that is that maybe there's something else they could do with the group that they have here. I think that that's where they need to figure that out. But I do think that 4 people in the booth is way too many. I think it's way too much. I think it's entirely. I know there's a lot that's going on, but again, you have those 4. You have the people that are the pit road reporters, and then you had we didn't really. I guess we didn't really see the pit box group. We didn't see Dale Jarrett and Brad Daugherty in today's broadcast, unless I missed something there. But they didn't seem to have as much of a presence in this broadcast there. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where something that they need to kind of figure out. But they definitely need to make sure that it shouldn't be a question of who the main play-by-play guy is. And I think the way that they're approaching it still doesn't feel any closer to that answer. And I hate it for him because I think Rick Allen has the look and has the attitude, and he certainly has the voice for it. But I don't think he has the presence for it. It's going to take somebody's got to be the adult in the room and keep these people and then the other people around him stay quiet when he's doing his thing. Much like how Mike Joy does it, much like how Alan Bestwick does it, even in the SRX series. I feel like he still commands that kind of presence there, and it's a hard thing to figure out. And I'm not going to pretend that everybody has the answer to that, but I think that's another thing to look at. So that's something that hopefully will work out. And it's the first broadcast. I don't know if they're still knocking the rust off or how dynamic this booth is going to be compared to what we've seen on the Fox side in the first half of this year. It could certainly change. But I do think there's some positives to glean from it. And I don't want to make it sound, I know there was some very good discussion there on Twitter there about some of the things that were kind of discussed there that we've already talked about in the show tonight. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, this NBC broadcast was completely perfect. They don't need to fix a thing. It's excellent. And let's just dump on Fox some more because, theirs was terrible. It's like there were some things that Fox was doing okay at. I don't want to make it seem like everything top to bottom was terrible. At the very least, they would have, at least you would understand what happened in some of these races. It just makes you wish that there's so much more that you could see. I felt that we saw a good amount of what was happening here, but probably the other limitation is that this wasn't the most competitive race, or it wasn't the most interesting track. Once we get to tracks like Daytona, or even next week with Road America, I think that's going to be a real challenge into how much of the action are we seeing. We had long green flag runs in this. We had very low attrition, very few accidents. But I think that when something did happen, they were showing it, but there just wasn't a whole lot of it there. And so, you had a situation where, Chase Elliott seemed like he had the best car at the end, was able to pull off and take the victory, and that's where it worked out from there. A much more competitive race like a Bristol or, again, Road America, Daytona, we're going to get a good cross-section of these in these next few weeks here. That's going to be the real test. So I'm going to be very interested to see how much action we do see and what, if anything, is missed. I don't think with the approach that they had today that they would have missed something like what we had at Knoxville last week for the truck race, where they missed 2 trucks flipping or nearly flipping. I don't think this camera group would have missed that from the angles that they were showing. They captured things pretty quickly, like the wheel that came off of the Chris Buescher car, or even the situation where just cars were just slowing down, like what happened with Chase Briscoe or earlier with William Byron. I felt that they actually jumped on that pretty quickly. And in a Fox broadcast, you maybe would see them like just starting to turn into the garage area, and they would be like, "Whoa, what happened?" And they're just asking each other what happened. There was a little bit of that when Josh Bilicki came down pit road, but at least their cameras were showing it. I think that was definitely a driver and a team that I don't think gets a lot of camera time, even when they're having some problems. Like not when they blew up at the end of the race, but in the earlier part of it when they lost fuel pressure and dropped to the back of the field. I thought they did a decent job following up on that and actually tracking what was happening. So hopefully we see that keep going. I mean, it takes a lot of work to keep it up at that level. But that's gonna be kind of interesting to see. But I think that'll be something to look at. I think that's another situation there with the situation for these different teams here. So I mean, again, a decent start to it. It's definitely different from the Fox broadcast for sure, but I didn't feel that it was different enough from 2021 NBC. The graphically, we're getting there. We're absolutely getting there. And the camera work, I didn't see a lot of the angles that I hate with the ones where you kind of get vertigo from just watching the cars wash by. I'll be watching for that when we get to Daytona. We get to some of these other super speedways. Atlanta will be the same situation too. Any of these ones that have more super speedway racing and the pack is just rushing past and we're not getting much analysis on that. That's something I'm going to be concerned about coming up here. And I think it'll be another good, clear demarcation from what we had in the Fox broadcast. So that'll be interesting. So yeah, I think that was another one to look at there too. I saw a couple super chats here. Thank you so much for these here. Let me make sure I jump into these. First one here, Michael Jensen. Thank you for your super chat here. First off, two questions. Can you explain how the 46 truck is a DNQ and finished last? I didn't catch qualifying for it. And do you think that having the action seem better at night, it'll be a night race next year? Good questions on both ends. If you mean, let's see here. Do you mean the 46 truck in this week's truck race or in, I guess we had I guess it wasn't last in, hang on, let me make sure I get that. No, it was last this week because it was Chase Janes. Yes, very confusing set of circumstances. And we'll talk about this here with the, I guess we can jump into that too, with the Truck Series last place situation there. So a very bizarre circumstance here. G2G Racing, we talked about since the Sonoma race, and that became kind of a big story that I covered there during that weekend, and we did the feature just last week. If you haven't seen that, that's still the pinned tweet on my Twitter profile, so you can check that out. G2G had another bizarre situation here. So we had a very stacked entry list for the Truck Series this week. I believe it was 42 trucks once Jennifer Jo Cobb was entered in the race. And, so you had several people that are going to be missing the race. I guess it was 6 people or 7 at this point. So during qualifying, you had 2 trucks that were actually caught up with technical infractions. One of them was Max Gutierrez in the number 22 for the AM racing effort. And the other one was Trey Hutchins, who we've only seen him attempt a couple races this year, attempted this race last year, had a great qualifying run that would have put him into the show. At that point, Chase Janes had not qualified for the race. In fact, he didn't even turn a qualifying lap because they had an issue with the truck. So they were like, okay, well, look, we can't even get the thing out to take a qualifying lap to even attempt it. So he didn't have a time to even begin with. But once the times were disallowed for both Gutierrez and the number 14 for Trey Hutchins, it completely shuffled around the order of owner points in terms of who was going to get what provisional. And I believe at that point, one of the other factors could be the number of attempts. And of course, the 14 being a part-time effort, and the 46 having attempted every race this year, much like the 22, this brought the 46 back into the show. The problem was the 46 still wasn't fixed. And so they couldn't even start the race at that point. And so we had a very unusual situation where it seemed like, according to timing and scoring, they actually were on the track when the green flag dropped. I haven't seen video evidence of this, but the leaderboard indicated that he was 18 seconds behind the leader and 14 seconds behind the 35th place Gutierrez truck when the green flag dropped. So they actually got the truck working well enough to get out there. But when he went down, apparently something happened on that first lap, had to duck into the garage area and didn't complete a lap, or did complete just one lap at that point. I don't believe he qualified. I don't believe he completed a lap at that point because that was the other issue. So he was in the garage area and they had to still fix this issue. Something that was going on with, I believe it was the electrical system. I'm trying to remember offhand. They had a substantial problem with it. It took 33 laps before he actually got back out there. And then he got back out and completed just one lap. The truck shut down again on the back straightaway and coasted in. And by the time he got back around, he completed his first lap. It took some ridiculous number of seconds where it would have been only an average of, I think, 3 miles an hour getting around there. And he could have completed more laps. If he just completed about 5 more laps, he wouldn't have finished last at all. He would have climbed past Jack Wood that wrecked in the early laps there. But unfortunately, he couldn't get back out there. So that ended up being a big mess there. So, yeah, very unusual. You don't typically expect a driver that is struggling that much and having mechanical issues and can't qualify the truck. But the one thing with the G2G team is that 46 has attempted every race this year. And that apparently was the big decider there. So they were able to actually start the race, even though they weren't ready, and even though they either missed the start or had just didn't complete the opening lap. They were able to get back out there and complete one lap that was at an extraordinarily slow speed and not get back out there. So that was a situation there from that. So it was very much a mess. I didn't watch qualifying live myself, but I had to kind of pick that apart when I was writing the article on Friday. And the full write-up is on that in the article as well. As to your second question, do you think that having the action seem better at night, it'll be a night race next year? Certainly a possibility. I tend to think of Nashville as more of a night race. I think they did some of that in the Xfinity series years ago. I think the challenge is probably the same challenge that Las Vegas has. I think that Nashville probably would rather have it be a day race because they probably want to have everybody stick around and enjoy the nightlife in the area. Not every track is like this. Sears Point, for example, is basically in the middle of nowhere. Even though it's in the Bay Area, it is surrounded on four sides by nothing. It is absolutely not the kind of track where you can walk out the front gate and go to a grocery store nearby and refill your cooler. It's not that kind of track. There are no amenities in that immediate area. Darlington is very much the same. It used to have like a drugstore, I think a CVS nearby, which was a little bit of a hike even getting to it. But I think even that's closed since then. We went there in 2019. So some of these tracks are a little bit more remote than others. And also not located in areas that have a really active nightlife. Yes, you got San Francisco at Sears Point, but San Francisco is a pretty long drive actually from the track, especially if you're stuck in the traffic that's always going to be there. Trying to get over the Golden Gate Bridge coming down that direction is going to be a problem. Then working your way around through the Bay Area is a whole other situation. So I think in that standpoint, like Vegas, they're probably going to look to do more of a day race. Certainly the Cup racing at Vegas, they've had night races too. They do that for the fall race like we had last year, and I anticipate they're going to again this year. But the Xfinity race, for example, was earlier in the day and ended just when it started to get dark. Nashville, they might do the same thing and still have it be a day event here. I was still surprised by how late it started in the day. And certainly the heat that was a big issue this entire weekend was a big factor in that too. As to see if that's going to stay, I'm not sure. I think that's going to be very much up in the air. But I think in terms of the tourism to the area, yes, I think the best time for that is going to be seeing that even before the racing and just kind of checking that out. But they also want to catch anybody that's leaving the track at the same time. You could be of two minds there, where you could have a race that ends at night in Vegas. Like Lastbro and I, we went to Fremont Street after the race last year on Sunday. Because of course we weren't going to commute back until Monday anyway, so that was fine. But it's a whole different, I guess, it's a different scenario from one region to the next. But it's definitely something to kind of look at too. Nicholas Gray, I see your question here as well. With the high temps in Nashville, I am sure drivers and fans appreciated the night race at the expense of red flags, but those temps were dangerous. Yeah, I mean, again, same situation there too. And that is the other aspect they got to look at, is certainly the weather. I mean, if you're going to have a date that's at the end of July, or end of June rather, getting pretty close to 4th of July weekend, you're going to have a situation. And it seemed like there was very little shade around the track. I don't know what it was like underneath the grandstands or anything like that. But certainly the logistics of that, I'm sure, were tested quite a bit during this weekend. Having the Truck Series race and the Xfinity Series race as well in very, very hot temperatures. I mean, and then having a situation where you had so many drivers that had heat exhaustion in it, are definitely things to look at. I'm going to be very interested to hear more about the improvements that were made to the next gen car with heat exposure in mind. Because I think it seemed like that during the first part of the race, at least I wasn't listening to as much concern about how air was circulating. Of course, the slits in the rear glass. And the way that air circulates through the car, because of course air circulation is a big part of the actual aerodynamics of the car this year. But the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series don't have that, and certainly in the Xfinity Series, with as grueling of a race as that became, we heard many more concerns about that. Noah Gragson being sick in his car twice in the last 50 laps. Ryan Vargas very exhausted getting out of his car. Parker Retzlaff as well. Natalie Decker had a cool suit fail. So did Kyle Weatherman, who was the last place finisher in it. And these were drivers that were plugging away very late into the race. Weatherman himself, despite all the issues he had with the power steering and the cool suit, completed, I believe, 118 laps, which was at least a good 50 laps further than any other last place finisher in the Xfinity Series race at Nashville. So that turned out to be a very low attrition race, despite the fact that it started with J.J. Yaley having a great practice run and then unfortunately having issues with the battery at the very beginning and him getting back out there many laps down. It was a very challenging weekend, I think, on all fronts. And I don't know if there's anything in the short term they could do to really help that in the Xfinity Series. As we talked about years past, this is something that does seem to affect these lower funded teams a lot more that can't afford really good cool suits or really sophisticated equipment. And of course, they're still locked into the NASCAR regulations where there's only so much they can do to the cars to really abate heat. It's going to be up to the sanctioning body to kind of help even that out. I don't think it's maybe practical for them to, sell cool suits to everybody. Maybe that's not the option, but maybe at least something that they can learn from the Cup car to apply back down the chain to the Xfinity and the truck entries there, especially the Xfinity cars. It seemed like that was a huge problem during the Saturday race there. So that would be another one to kind of look at too. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the heat exhaustion can't be, something that you overlook there because it's certainly going to be a problem there too. Yeah, still a good height situation there too. Oh, thank you for checking out, Jason. There, but yeah, have a good night there. I know it's a late evening here for you guys there too. Tyler Reddick was saying it was too cold in the car. Well, okay. Well, all the more reason that they look at, these other things that they could bring to the other series. That's worlds apart from what we had in the Xfinity race. Obviously, this race ending at night changed things quite a bit, and having that much rain in the area too. But I think it's still worth something else that they can kind of look at too. But that'll be another one to kind of check out. Let's get into more into both those races there as well. So we talked a bit about the Truck Series last place finisher. That was Chase Janes making his second start. He made his debut at Martinsville earlier this year. We saw a lot of drivers from Martinsville actually attempting this race, which is a reason that the entry list ended up being as big as it was. Justin S. Carroll still trying to make his first start this year. Unfortunately missed the show. Max Gutierrez, talked about him starting at the back of the field. Great run for him. I know he had a bit of controversy when he got to Haley Deegan during a race for 11th, but he was running just as well as she was and ended up climbing up into the 8th spot, which is the best run that the AM Racing team has had with a driver other than Austin Wayne Self. So a tremendous effort for him. Good to see him have a good run. Apparently we're going to have Self return to that truck team when they go to Mid-Ohio there in a couple weeks. So that'll be another story coming up here. But Ryan Preece going back-to-back in the Truck Series race during a broadcast that unfortunately still had the same hallmarks of frustrations in the Fox broadcasts. I know I got some criticism for making fun of the lip smack issue in the booth there. But again, I still maintain that it was just as distracting as ever. For some reason, their microphones pick it up a lot better, and it seems to happen a whole lot. And I think if you have on one end the NBC booth, where they're just filling the air and they're talking constantly and they don't have anything close to that, the Fox broadcast for the Truck Series race, you only get that kind of lip smack if they're not talking for a while, and all of a sudden they got to have that little sound where they got to pull their lips apart again to start talking again. That's what it sounded like to me. So I don't know if they just need to get more drinks in the booth or something. But I still find it extremely distracting there. Is it the biggest problem? Absolutely not. But it is a problem. I think it's something that's also a symptom of some of the other issues in the booth. One of the other issues, of course, was the fact that Zane Smith, tracking down Ryan Preece, was just about missed by the broadcast, just like the issues back at Knoxville. And then the booth was basically asking each other, well, how the heck did he get up there? Well, good question. It would have been great if we all saw that. They couldn't wait another 2 laps to kind of point the camera at something else. But in point of fact, Preece still held on to get the win over Zane Smith. Carson Hocevar made a good move for second. Has absolutely been on the comeback trail here these last couple weeks since having the relief driver Daniel Suarez there at Sonoma. Didn't have to have one at Knoxville. Didn't have to have one here again, finishing in the 3rd spot. Ty Majeski, I still think he's a diamond in the rough here in the Truck Series, and Thor Sport Equipment is as fast as they come in the Truck Series. Ben Rhodes has been practically Superman in that series and has kind of taken that top spot there from Matt Crafton, I'd say, in these last couple of years, despite Crafton winning a championship not that long ago. But Ty Majeski is absolutely on the cusp of getting his first win, too. I think the host of our attention is kind of distracted a little bit from him there. I know the host of our has probably come off a bit more fan-friendly with the hats and all that stuff, and certainly the adversity he has very realistically faced this year has made him certainly a sympathetic character to that. But I don't think we can overlook Majeski either, because he's been very much on a similar path where he's had rides. He was part of that effort with Roush Fenway Group and the number 60 car that trapped Austin Cindric in some rough runs for a while, to the point where Cindric wasn't sure where his career was headed. And luckily, he found a better ride at Penske and got a better position there. Majeski now in this situation where he's now in the best ride of his career and is very close to pulling off another win. Will we see it at Mid-Ohio in a couple weeks? It's certainly possible. He looked great at Sears Point and had a great run here. I don't think it's necessarily as much of an underdog effort because compared to the Nice effort, maybe that's why it hasn't been getting as much press. Yeah, I look forward to seeing whatever's going to happen with the number 66 team going forward there. We saw Christian Eckes get his first win at Las Vegas last fall. Could be very possible that could be another situation that we see out of that organization. Stuart Friesen finishing in 5th, Christian Eckes in 6th, Tyler Ankrum 7th, Max Gutierrez in the 8th spot, John Hunter Nemechek in 9th, and Matt Crafton rounding out the top 10. Derek Kraus got himself into a little bit of trouble at the end of that race. Him and Parker Kligerman with a little bit of a face-to-face there on pit road from a video shown from the stands. Kligerman ended up back in the 20th spot when the two of them made contact at the end of the race. Kligerman back further back than he would have run ordinarily. Right behind Kligerman, however, Caden Honeycutt in the second G2G racing entry. We've only seen Honeycutt make his Truck Series debut at Martinsville earlier this year after Matt Jaskell left and took the sponsor Auto Parts for Less with him. That was one of the first obstacles that the G2G teams had this year. Honeycutt unfortunately had a wreck that night, but this time around, despite some issues running at the further back in the field, outlasted a lot of the other competitors and finished on the lead lap in the 21st spot. I think that's a very impressive run given the issues that the G2G team has had. So certainly kudos to them on that. One spot ahead of Stephen Parsons, who was kind of a last-minute entry into the number 20 team this time around. Timmy Hill, Lawless Allen, the other competitors back there. Nick Lights in his Truck Series debut over the Josh Riam team. We talked a lot about how the 43 team has struggled through so many races this year. Then the only driver that seemed like had the magic key to that truck was Brad Perez with his great run at Coda and then again at Sears Point, overcoming the nose damage there in the incident with Matt Crafton. And I'm not just saying that because we had the logo on his truck, although that certainly was exciting too. Again, good to see another driver have a solid finish. 26th place there on the lead lap for Nick Lights, and a great effort for him. Todd Bodine looked like he was going to have a good show out there. Had a top 10 run for part of this. Unfortunately, his truck didn't seem to recover from the spin that he had through the infield grass. Ends up finishing 2 laps down in the 27th position. Haley Deegan mentioned her troubles there after the tangle there with Gutierrez. Dropped her back into the 28th spot. Chris Hacker had a great paint scheme there. Unfortunately finished back in the 29th position there. But then the bottom 5 were several unhappy drivers there. Corey Heim with a bit of a scary incident there. His with Grant Enfinger and Matt DiBenedetto when they went 4 wide into turn 3. Had a pretty good pile up at that point there. Good to see Heim get out of that truck there because that was a very hard hit that he undertook there in the number 51. Camden Murphy, it was good to see him back out into the Truck Series field. He's always somebody that's able to kind of get a lot out of equipment. We'd seen this before years ago when he drove for Nemco Motorsports, but unfortunately this time around got some contact and stuffed him into the outside wall, driving for On Point Motorsports and finished in the 34th spot. Jack Wood behind him after the aforementioned accident, and Chase Janes rounding out the field there with his first career last place finish, and G2G Racing getting another bizarre last place situation there in the Truck Series side. So working our way back over to the Xfinity Series division, Kyle Weatherman, your last place finisher from there, but again, it did not seem like that was going to be the situation right from the start, much like the Truck Series race. Mechanical issues for J.J. Yaley which is an absolute heartbreaker. Both Yaley and Weatherman, who ended up being kind of the primary figures in the last place battle, were both very surprising in practice. We've talked a lot on this show about how much Jesse Iwuji needs to keep Weatherman in that car to really help them get to the next point. Look at how much Weatherman helped at Mike Harmon Racing and gave Harmon their first top 10. He stayed in there even after Bailey Curry left to JD Motorsports. Since then, of course, Brennan Poole's now taken over, and he's kind of found his way over to the DGM racing team, and he did great there. Had a top 10 run in Atlanta to match his 8th place run there at Kentucky, and then unfortunately found himself without a ride when that team scaled back. I still think that's one of the most underrated drivers that's in the truck Xfinity series right now. Just needs to get in the right situation, just have a bit of luck. We see this out of him and Curry. Really, both of them are drivers that are very hands-on and helping with their teams and everything too. I'm sure that's been a big asset to Iwuji's team. And again, under very difficult conditions with the weather, he was still driving it with no power steering and no cool suit until he just couldn't do it anymore. And that was within about 70 laps of the finish. So running more than half the distance. I think that's certainly laudable to see in hindsight there. Unfortunately, it still left him in last place. J.J. Yaley with the aforementioned electrical issue, the battery issue. He was in the top 5 in the practice session, which is huge to see. Yaley, we've talked about before, last year at Las Vegas. He has some supporters that actually at the occasional race give him great equipment, and they just put him out there and see what he can do. And even if he's driving for Carl Long's team, you'll see every once in a while he'll have a run where he'll be right up there. Earlier this year he had the effort where he got the Penske car after the help that Carl Long gave, I believe it was Austin Cindric on the Cup Series side there with the backup car they needed at that point. Unfortunately, it resulted in an accident there, and unfortunately in this situation he still only finished 33rd, but the results will not show how well Yaley performed this weekend. Again, people talk about you want to have Cup drivers in lower division series. I still point to drivers like J.J. Yaley and say, hey, this is a driver that these guys can really match their talents to. It's just unfortunate that sometimes he has these situations where it's just terrible luck and not a terrible team. I mean, Carl Long's team, they throw everything in it. They don't really have any off days over at MBM. They try to get the best run they can, and they were not going to just quit when that situation with the battery happened. Apparently, I hear that it was a JD Motorsports battery that actually got the 13 back on track there and climbed him out of the bottom 5. So an interesting story on that side. Another side with qualifying, we had a decent number of cars on the Xfinity side, but seeing that Dylan Bassett finally getting the second start for the Bassett Brothers entry, that 77 car, the bright orange entry with the Honest Amish sponsorship on it. Great paint scheme out there. It's unfortunate that they've had to rack up so many D&Qs as they've had. They haven't even been able to attempt all the races since then. I believe it was Austin Dillon that they had make their series debut at COTA last year, but actually getting in with their own drivers and under their own steam. They still ended up finishing further back in the 30th spot there, but I think still a positive there. Anytime you get new teams involved in the sport, or they're able to break through and actually get a race under their belt, I think that's huge for them. So certainly a challenging one, I think, to make their debut in, but I know that they must have been happy to get back out there. Not as happy, of course, were other drivers that were eliminated in accidents. Jeb Burton, Sheldon Creed, and then Joe Graff Jr. Ended up collected in the biggest accident during that race. Graff ended up back in the 37th position. A bit of contact there, although he wasn't responsible for the wreck. Sheldon was very upset at Jeb Burton for the contact that put him into the fence. Ended up eliminating all 3 of them. Josh Williams rounded out the bottom 5 after a late race electrical issue, but everybody else, even with the heat being what it was, finished the race under power behind an utterly dominant Justin Allgaier. Allgaier is no stranger to the heat. When we were in Texas last year covering the All-Star race, he was in the Xfinity race racing against Kyle Busch, our own favorite bushwhacker out there, and he was the only one that was able to go toe-to-toe with Kyle there at the front of the field. And Kyle had a very difficult time shaking him off there in that Twix car. I don't know how well it came across during the broadcast, but that was a brutally hot weekend there at the track, and very difficult circumstances, and he still dug deep and almost pulled off the victory there but not quite in those circumstances. No such situation here with no Kyle Busch in the field. Allgaier leads 134 of the 188 laps and crushes everybody else under his heel, including Trevor Bayne in the second spot, Riley Herbst in third, Ty Gibbs in fourth, Sam Mayer in the fifth spot. Mayer with a little bit of controversy, although he did indicate it was just an accident when he got into Ty Gibbs. I was kind of reminded of the Kurt Busch Tony Stewart incident in the 2007 Daytona 500, where a fast closing car gets the first one loose, and you're still closing so much that you end up running fender to fender into him. In the case of Busch and Stewart, that ended up in a wreck that eliminated the two most dominant cars from that Daytona 500 and opened the door wide open for a situation where you actually had the finish between Kevin Harvick and Mark Martin. In this situation here, we actually saw some pretty remarkable driving skills out of both Gibbs and Mayer, and perhaps the resiliency of the Xfinity car itself with the composite body. These teams finishing in the fourth and fifth positions there. So kudos to them as well. Ryan Preece, driving for BJ McLeod with Stuart Haas support, I'm sure, in that Ford, finishing in the sixth spot. Jeffrey Earnhardt, great run for him in the seventh spot, his best run since his runner-up at Talladega, and that was with Childress effort, this being with Sam Hunt. Hunt's team has done a great job this year. We've seen them with John Hunter Nemechek and other drivers out there getting some good runs. That was great to see. Parker Retzlaff, mentioned him briefly earlier. Absolutely remarkable what that kid's doing. He deserves as many starts in those RSS cars as they can give him. Apparently he still has a very limited schedule this year. Not sure what his next start is, but a 12th place run. I believe his fourth consecutive finish of 17th or better. Absolutely remarkable. And he very easily could have had a top 20 in his first start if it weren't for a mechanical issue in that one. He's been a factor in every race that he's been in. And given the fact that he was still able to do this despite the oppressive conditions, is another remarkable feat, I think, for him. Stephen Parsons, mentioned him on the Truck Series side, ran double duty with the Xfinity Series, back with the Alpha Prime team, finishing in the 15th spot in the number 45, ahead of all three of the Kaulig Racing entry drivers there, Allmendinger, Hemrick, and Castle, who all three were snagged for pit road penalties on the same caution, ended up finishing behind him there. So kudos to Parsons on that one there too. The only Cup Series ringer in the field, Tyler Reddick, finishing in the 21st spot, finishing 2 laps down in that situation. Could Jade Buford have done better? Probably. But hey, that's what that team's deciding to do. So go figure. But again, Xfinity race, I thought it was a solid race. It was definitely shades of 1998 at Martinsville or that old Gateway race years ago with just the heat exhaustion. Definitely a big factor in this one again. But definitely, I thought it was a decent broadcast. I thought they did a decent job in that one, in spite of, again, the commentary still being a bit crowded and disorganized. I'm hoping things kind of sort themselves out this year, but I don't want to belabor that point too much more after that. Looking back at the Cup Series race, just looking at anything else to talk about. I know you guys were asking about the caution at the end of the Cup Series race just tonight. Of course, there was the incident between Cole Custer and Brad Keselowski, or I guess just Keselowski pounding into the outside wall, and then even pulling out of the way to the point where he was in the grass on the back straightaway in the last lap. It seemed like kind of a little bit of a dangerous situation there. It wasn't even a situation where, they didn't want the race to end under caution, for a green-white checker finish. Although it would have been in that point with the impact to the wall. But it sounds like, I understood that there was some discussion this week about them having a new caution protocol, where I guess it isn't just literally flipping a switch. I guess there's some other stopgap measures or something they're working through. Maybe that was an example of it there. But still wasn't a situation where, I guess he dropped debris on the track. I mean, the broadcast booth definitely seemed like they wanted that caution. They're like, oh, look at the trail behind the 6 car. Oh, look at he's on the apron. They need to throw the caution. And it's like, I mean, they didn't say they needed to throw the caution, but they definitely did it with the attitude of that for sure. But I guess it turned out okay. I'm glad it wasn't anything that was dangerous for him. I think if you have a single car incident and the car can get out of the way, there's no reason you can't finish the race under power, no matter what the track is, even if it's a super speedway. I mean, how many races do we see on road courses, for example, where somebody has a situation on the last lap or something like that? I think as long as, they can get to the finish line and finish the race safely, you don't have somebody that's stopped in front of the finish line or a lot of debris there. They got spotters that are keeping an eye out. As long as they're doing their job, I'll put their faith in that too. I'm just glad he still had his window net up, so we didn't have a situation like we had back in the All-Star race not too long ago. Going to be interested to see if Corey LaJoie makes those shirts after the tangle there with Alex Bowman. Perhaps there could be something new on that this week. I want to also give a big shout out to Michael McDowell for continuing his summer stretch here. He had that great run at Gateway where he led all those laps. We talked about Sears Point where he had the top 5 there. Then we get the off weekend and he still keeps the momentum going this week. Was in the top 10 just about the entire race. It seemed like most of it at least. Got shaken out a bit to the 13th spot. Also impressive was Bubba Wallace, who seemed to have the same luck that he had at Kansas, where he was passing so many cars out there. Like they said in the broadcast, just cautions didn't fall the right way, and he ended up further back in the lineup. But finishing in the 12th spot with his teammate in the second place, decent run for the 2311 crew. And I know they got to be happy about that. Eric Jones very quietly in the 11th spot, despite his car catching on fire at one point. Almost following the Kyle Larson model from the 600 a few weeks ago. Good to see that nothing got out of control on that situation. But Jones, I still think one of the most underrated drivers in the Cup Series side here. I think people, when he got in that 43 car and he left Gibbs, I think people were like, oh, okay, we can put him to bed. He's probably not going to be a factor for the rest of his career. Anybody who's seen what's happened with Daniel Suarez and how he's turned his career around at Trackhouse would probably be remiss to overlook the fact that the Petty team now with the GMS support and how determined they are to win, I think that could be something that puts them over the edge. I think Ty Dillon has even had the occasional good run this year. But Jones in the flagship 43, I think, is even closer. It'd be good to see him get back to the form that we saw out of him back at Fontana earlier this year, where he was just as much of a factor as Suarez in the finish. This is probably the first good indication of that since then. So certainly another one to mention there at the same time. Tyler Reddick with that bizarre situation there, mentioning Bubba Wallace earlier. Wallace stopping as he came off pit road and Tyler Reddick getting in the back of him. Reddick still finishing in the 18th spot, despite what seemed like pretty good damage to the nose of his car at a track that is a downforce track and a very fast one with a concrete surface. Good recovery for Reddick. It seems like the Childress teams have kind of dropped off a little bit since the first part of the year, where it seemed like especially Reddick was absolutely just getting really close to getting his first win. Hopefully they're kind of turning the corner again and still able to kind of be a factor here. But that'll be another one to look at. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., like Truex, just got the contract extension. Him finishing in the 16th spot there. This is a track that I thought he was pretty good at this last year. We didn't see as much of him in this year's race, but still on the correct half of the field, I would say, versus some of the other competitors in this one. But it'll be interesting to see what we have coming up here in Road America and some of the other races coming up there too. Oh, Confirmation 07, thank you for the super chat there. I see your word pain. Yeah, I'm with you there, man. I'm sorry that Bubba didn't have the best run out there, but like I was just saying, I mean, he overcame a lot out there. I think that's a very positive thing you can look at, just like with the Kansas run. Hopefully there'll be a situation where you don't have to pass as many cars as he's had in those situations. But the better he's able to kind of recover from one race to the next, I think is good. The last place run he had at Sears Point, I was very surprised at, how open he was to interviews. I think he was talking with plenty of people. I know I didn't interview him at the time because I felt everybody else had covered it pretty well, but I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could have got in there and, had any questions there too, but I didn't really have anything else to offer at the time. So that was kind of the situation there. But I thought that was pretty good one to see. But hopefully things will turn around there for a lot of these other organizations there too. So, oh goodness, we're past 10 o'clock here on the West Coast. So we'll transition into our next segment here with our trivia part here. And we got some show and tell for you guys here as well. So we'll go into that. If you guys have any other questions that you'd like me to address here on this, go ahead and jump into the chat here as well. I appreciate you guys for sticking around here on a very late evening show. Hopefully we'll have some more races here where we'll be a little bit earlier in the day and maybe won't be as much of an endurance here But we'll find out at Road America and everything going up there. So, hang on. Whoop, hang on. Wrong button there. Alrighty. So, again, the categories on our old Tiger Electronics deal here are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild cards. Go ahead and mention those in the chat here. Again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are our categories for this. I saw a question in the chat here asking about the shirt. Yes, I definitely wanted to pick this up here to support buddy Rick Houston there over at the Scene Vault podcast. Did this great shirt. I saw this on Facebook here. Somebody else posted it showing LW Wright's number 34. And they had a wonderful little detail where, actually I can show you here, all the little contingency decals are representing the Scene Vault podcast itself. I'm not sure how well that shows the shadow there. There you go. So you can, can't see it very well there. But yeah, there you go. So yeah, it looks like the Die Hard logo, looks like the Goodyear logo. So they did a beautiful job on this. I'll drop the link in the chat. I have it somewhere on this, and we'll get that in here too. Do we know what happened in New York racing? I do not. I have not heard anything new from John Cohen, which is too bad because I'd love to hear more from that organization. I was hoping that they would continue to maintain a bit of a presence here as one of the few open teams that are still left out there to attempt cup races. But we haven't seen them since, Richmond, when Biffle was last out there. I was really looking forward to meeting back up with them at Sears Point, and unfortunately that didn't happen. Hopefully we will at Las Vegas or Phoenix later this year, but we'll find that out at the same time. Let's see, LW Wright, Scene Vault, shirt, where was it? I think it's on Redbubble. Where was it? So I want to get the actual link. Was it on there? Because it's always tricky because there's always ones where they have like multiple. There you go. You gotta check the Scene Vault one. There we go. The LW Wright collection. I think this is it. Okay. There we go. Oh, they have them in sweatshirts and shirts in multiple different colors too. So if you want it, but you want it a different one, definitely check this out. Oh, I gotta post this in the actual link here. Okay, good. There we go. All right, and there you go. Boom. So there's the link to the shirts if you guys want to check that out there. Yeah, I thought they did a really nice job on these, and it helps out the Scene Vault podcast and what they do over there. And definitely a big fan of what Rick does over there on his show. So definitely check that out. Yeah, let's see here. Do we have any votes here for the categories? Oh, yeah, we're going to do show and tell here, too. So we do have that still here. All right, so again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card are the categories for a trivia. So go ahead and make your picks on that. And as we do this, where did I put it? I have another box of diecast to show those of you that are in our late night segment here. So I got another one here to show you guys. We did the Richard Petty box during our Knoxville show. And this week we got a combination of famous last place finishers as well as some other paint schemes and just diecast that I get a kick out of. So let me open this up and get a better view of it. I'm going to bring the camera over and we're going to do this here for a bit. And while you guys pick your categories, and we'll see if we can get this to work as well as it did last week. So we got the camera. We'll try to make the camera as stable as we can. So I do have a couple of custom cars here. This first one here was a former Denny Hamlin car that was converted to a Michael McDowell HP Racing LLC entry. You'll see in this box, unlike the last one, I put some tissue paper in here to keep the cars from kind of shaking around a bit. So I can at least maybe kind of move that a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. But yeah, this one here, just the plain black paint scheme from 2011. Right next to it here, we got a 2000 Bill Elliott car. I like this one from Action Racing because they made the yellow rims on it. It didn't actually run that version in the Cup Series back then, but I thought that it looked a lot better with that one. That's the only version I've seen of that. I swear, that season, he had, I believe, a last place run Was it the July race at Daytona? It was one of the ones that year. It was either Daytona or Darlington. It was a track that he'd usually been good at, but he had problems in that one. But I thought that paint scheme really came into its own that last year. This one right here is a Jimmy Hensley 1993 version of the number 44 car, the SCP Pontiac. This was made into a diecast that Racing Champions made. Unfortunately, a lot of them, you'll see the paint's kind of flaking off there on the stripe on the side of it there. A lot of these old diecasts, especially the petty cars for some reason, that orange paint or that bright red or vermilion kind of paint tends to flake off. But this was actually a last place run too. Hensley had a one-off driving for this team at Martinsville in the fall race there, and then unfortunately got in a wreck in the early laps, and they still actually made a commemorative diecast for the run with Hensley's name on the roof of the car. You can see it there. You go, just a little bit on that. Rick Wilson being the traditional driver on that. This here we got a custom version of the America Israel racing car, the former entry that was Jay Robinson and Robert Blakeney's entry. They always ran the number 49 car for years. This was 2012. Right next to it here, we got a number 13 Max Pappas car tomorrow entry. I think this is 2009, 2010. It's a little hard to see with the paper there. Let's see if we can get that pulled out a little better. There you go. Kind of get a better view of that. You can see the William Byron underneath there as well. There you go. Let's see. We got a David Gilliland. I got this one in here because I remember it finished last at Sears Point one year. I believe it was 2015, I want to say. 2015, 2014. It was like right around that range there. But it was with the number 38 car. Always seems to kind of get the short straw among the entries there. This one here in 1988. Brett Bodine car. I actually had a diecast version of this I bought at Phoenix that had the car upside down in the package. Unfortunately, the packaging kind of fell apart because it was so old. But this is that diecast. This is the first last place finisher of a cup race at Phoenix in 1988 when Brett Bodine was driving for the late, great Bud Moore. Right next to it here, we have William Byron, who very nearly got his first last place finish since this run in the C Glass number 24 in the 2020 Daytona 500. He won one of the dual races during that weekend. I like the detail on this where they added the little roof hatch outline there on the roof as well, so that one's pretty good. Here's Casey Kane's infamous Aquafina car that handed him, I believe, his first last place run on the front stretch at Pocono. That's actually part of the opening animation on the opening sequence here to the behind the wall logo there. So we got that. One of the AJ Allmendinger cars, I believe this is the one that had the granny shift at Sears Point, where he finished last in that event. Right next to that, one of the best Chip Ganassi paint schemes, the old Jason Leffler car, had, I believe, at least one last place run in 2001 driving this one here. Leffler took over for Ted Musgrave, who, of course, inherited the car after the accident with Kenny Irwin there before that. The 01 car, the singular Dodge, you don't see too many references to this one here anymore, but the inaugural pole sitter to the races at Kansas that season was kind of an interesting moment for that team. Right next to that, a 1991 Larry Pearson, 1991 Last Car champion. These were made as just kind of promo diecast back then. I believe in Texas they had like a whole box of these, which is kind of interesting. You remember the picture I took of the Kellogg's car in the 1992 version, where the number is slightly different. That was the one that Greg Sachs ran, but this one with a bit of the simpler numbers on the side, but otherwise the same scheme was Larry Pearson's version. I got a 1998 Dick Trickle right here, the Premier Edition one. Next to that, we got a retro version of Jeff Gordon's 1993 car that was made by, I believe, Winter Circle, the Action Racing spinoff. So we got that one on here. Did really nice detail on that one. So we got that there as well. Because Gordon did, in fact, get a Last Car championship himself. Joe Nemechek, very high in the Last Car rankings. First driver to break J.D. McDuffie's record of last place finishes. This is his 2010, 2011 scheme there. The blue and yellow when he brought back Nemco Motorsports. Another custom car here. We have a 1997 Kenny Wallace. These old Thunderbirds take up so much space here compared to some of the other ones. They have these big and boxy cars. Lasbro is always a big fan of these cars. I think I personally didn't mind the Tauruses But these Thunderbirds are always pretty neat here. But yeah, the tooling on this, they just make the cars just look so massive back then. So you got that one there too. We get a few throwback schemes at this point that finished in the last spot or towards the back of the field. Among these, a Trevor Bayne last place run in the Mark Martin throwback. This on a Fusion here. Andy Houston, your 2001 last car champion, driving the number 96 version of the McDonald's car. That's right here. This team that only lasted about halfway through the 2001 season, so you got that one there too. This is the Bobby Labonte version of the number 47 car. In 2013, he blew an engine on the opening lap of the Sears Point race and became the first driver since Tom Hubert in 2006 to finish last without completing a lap of a Sears Point race. This car actually was stopped in the carousel for pretty much, I think, most of the distance there before they were able to tow him back to the garage area. This is Clint Boyer in the number 14 car, the Mark Martin throwback, or I guess Jeff Gordon throwback if you want to look at that side too. The number 14 car that was last in the 2017 Southern 500, the first Darlington race I attended. He stalled this car directly in front of us. My brother and I were in the stands there for that one and dropped out of that race, so you have that one there. Josh Wise, when he drove the number 26, the MDS entry for Front Row Motorsports, had a very bizarre battle for Rookie of the Year with Stephen Light. Both these teams were running start and park efforts at some point. Wise ended up losing Rookie of the Year to Light in the process, but the number 26 car, another custom on that one. Down here, we got a Darrell Waltrip Victory Tour number 66. So let me pull that back a little bit. See if it's not quite as fuzzy. We got that here. It's got the Victory Tour icon on the hood of the car. Next to that, we got a 2000 Scott Pruitt, number 32 scheme there. Whoop, let me kind of straighten that out. I don't know why it's a bit fuzzier than before. And then next to that, we have, of course, Kevin Harvick's first ever last place finisher at Charlotte in 2018. His first last place run in 1,089 combined Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series races. Only time I've ever seen him run this scheme, where it was like half Mobil 1 and half the Busch scheme, and probably wasn't too happy to run it after that point as well. But then that's being the first one on that. I'll show you the other half of this one here too, as we get some more votes in here for trivia, and then we'll wrap up the show for the evening here. On this side, I just kind of put in some other paint schemes that I just kind of liked over the years, or some die casts that I've had. There's not really any pattern to any of these, so we'll kind of get this short up here. So first and foremost, we got another Neil Bonnet. Let me bring that down into the camera shot here. Bring that back. There you go. Neil Bonnet in the Country Time car, the 1994 Daytona 500 attempt. This one with the hood open on it. So that one comes out. Very nice detail on this, especially back then. You don't usually see too many with the little details here. You can kind of get a view of some of the other ones here. Robbie Gordon in the 2002 version of the singular paint scheme. Robbie always very popular up here at Sears Point. So we got that one represented there as well. Ooh, there we go. Finally, we're getting a little bit of focus here. Right next to it here, this is the first Tony Stewart diecast I bought in 1999. You could not find these anywhere. Even midway through the 99 season, they really kind of underestimated how many diecasts that they had to make of the 20 car. I don't think I found this until it was almost the 2000 season. But this one here, very nice. I like the nose kind of filled in on the front of it. And then we got the rookie stripes on the back. Actually doesn't even have the Home Depot logo on the back of it there. But I believe this is an Action Racing release back then. So you got that one there. We got a Ward Burton 2002 Daytona 500 winner. This one has the tire mark on the back of it here. Driver's autograph, printing of it, of course, on the hood of the car. Right next to that, we got Michael Waltrip's Nation's Rent car from the 2000 season, right before he went to DEI. You got Darrell Waltrip's 1997 Parts America car, where he got his last top 5 with this at Sears Point. Then we go down here another row. We got Casey Atwood in the 2002 Sirius car. This is another car that, for whatever reason, was very hard to find, and then suddenly they started producing that one in Winter Circle back then. Atwood, after he lost his ride to Jeremy Mayfield. I know Mayfield had his appearance on the Junior Download here this week. That gets mentioned a bit more. This is where he ended up with Jim Smith's team. Next to this, we have a Kodiak version of the Stacy Compton number 92, another great paint scheme for the 2001 season. This one with the actual tobacco sponsor on it. They had other releases of this, including ones they actually made for cereal box releases with, I believe it's General Mills products that obviously didn't have the tobacco sponsor on it. They have NASCAR diecast producing, I guess, is still just as particular about that as ever. But that's they did do a limited release of this one too. Right next to that, we got Ryan Newman. I believe this is a rookie car. This is the same car that I believe I brought with me at Phoenix last year for Newman's last start, and had that car taken. Took a picture of this car in front of Newman's car on the grid for what so far has remained his last Cup start at the moment. There's a decade of diecast commemorating car here. Racing Champions made in 1999. So fictional car on that one. These two here, as you can see, there's definitely some clear pen marks on it after the 2003 Darlington finish. I bought these die-casts and marked them up, trying to approximate kind of the look of the cars that were beat up at the finish of the 2003 Darlington race, the photo finish between the two of them. So that's just good old Sharpie, just kind of marked them up on that one. But I don't think I've really done that with. I don't usually do that with this, but yeah, I definitely kind of did that on these. But yeah, obviously that finish being as amazing as it was, and these cars are pretty easy to find back then. That's kind of what it was back then. You could find a decent amount of Hot Wheels cars there, so I had those kind of marked up for that representation. Meantime, we got Robbie Gordon's Menards car here, car of tomorrow. Love the kind of the update of this the Sprint paint scheme, and they ran it on that one too. So we got that. Right here, we got Brett Bodine's Hooters car. Whoop. Let me see if we can get that kind of in focus here. Can I bring it in closer? Need to figure out a way to kind of do this where it's not quite as fuzzy. But we got that. Yeah, the 2002 version of it. Really like this paint scheme. Ran it into 2002 and 2003. Obviously, for those of you who've seen the rise of the field fillers, you know Brett's name comes up quite a bit. There were a couple episodes I wasn't able to find a connection. Believe me, I was looking for one. But Brett Bodine and the Hooters car there. This is a 1997 Bill Elliott. One thing that was always cool with the Racing Champions releases of the Bill Elliott's is they had like a red chassis there, a red interior. So you got kind of that. You can see it on the bottom. Or I guess it's gray over there. But I mean, I thought, but at least red for the interior, which you don't usually see on any of the other cars there. Oh, there we go. And the Reese's logo on the side of that one. Always like this one too. Mike Wallace's paint job here. 2002 Daytona 500 car, the Auto Leave number 33. The waiting times of the number 33 entry under the Andy Petrie era here. So we got that one. The number 33 on that. I believe he stalled before the race started, but then was able to keep going. The Red Bull cars, I understand, are very popular online. We do have a 2007 old body AJ Allmendinger here, not the car tomorrow, but the old, I guess what's the Gen 4, Gen 3 car there. So there you go on that. Right next to AJ, we get that one in there. We have Steve Park from 1998, when Steve was injured during his rookie campaign. I don't believe it has rookie stripes on it, no, but this is a old Winner's Circle production there of the number 1 car there before he won his first race in the 2000 season, so it's got the older Monte Carlo body on that. Ward Burton in 1998, the MBNA car was one of the sleekest ones out there, and this is the 98 version of it here, the black and silver car. Still prefer the older Pontiac to the new, but this one always had like a really neat look to it. Came very close to a lot of wins in that time too, so that's always a good one to kind of look at too. Let me get this back in. Whoop, there we go. A lot of different alcohol-sponsored cars here. This is one of the versions for Sterling Marlin's famous Silver Bullet. This is, I believe, the 2004 version, or 2000. I don't see the Nextel logo. It might be 2003, but still has like the old Dodge RT nose on it. I never minded the censored alcohol-sponsored ones because they always had clever workarounds for them. I think I've mentioned that on the show here before. But this one here has Marlin's name. Kind of, I mean, it kind of did this whole black hood thing, which is very different from the way the scheme actually looked. Let me see if I can kind of get that in the light a little better. But yeah, it's got Sterling's name kind of printed on there. It doesn't show off very well. Oh, there we go. Finally, there you go. Kind of see that a little bit better. But yeah, then the Chip Ganassi with Felix Sabata's logo on the rear quarter panels. Seemed like they had to take quite a few artistic liberties on this one here as well. Further down, we go back to the 2000 season. Here's a Kevin LePage FamilyClick.com car. The cryptocurrency sponsors are not the first series of sponsors that seem to spring up from nowhere. The .com bubble, of course, was very big from that era, and this was one of the big notable ones for a sponsorship on a Roush Racing entry. And Kevin LePage back in the 2000 season used to be the TV Guide or Prime Star entry, and then that changed up very much too. He had the earlier part of the year actually sponsored by Northern Light, which is one of those old precursors to Google back then. So you had that. This Jeremy Mayfield has always intrigued me, that the number is, that the 2 there, or really both digits, look so different from a traditional Penske one. But again, little quirks to that always kind of entertained me, so that's always one that I picked up. This is a 1999 version of the Mobile One Taurus. Again, Jeremy on the Dale Jr. download this week. This is one of the cars that he ran there. It was kind of a transitional period before he really broke out and had a couple wins in the 2000 season. I have that one in another box. We'll probably have that for another show here coming up. Of the 2000 season, I do also have a rookie Matt Kenseth right here with the yellow rims. Again, much like the Bill Elliott earlier, didn't see the yellow rims that often on this car. But again, a really nice version of the scheme on the old Ford Taurus. No rookie stripes, I don't think. No, not on this one. But Old Racing Champions, they finally upgraded their diecast a lot. That Mayfield that you saw earlier, that was kind of the big change from 99 to 2000, and they kept that really through their last couple of years of producing diecast. Last one that we have here is a Brett Bodine. Again, this is the 2001 version, the Ralph Supermarkets car. So we got that one there too with the... it doesn't have the red cell batteries. I think that was 2000 later on in the 2001 season, but it does have the backing on that one there. So yeah, definitely wanted to kind of show you some more around here. I got some other stuff to show you on future episodes, so I'm going to kind of do that for probably these next few here for sure, at least. We'll kind of try to find some different things here to show off on camera, but we'll try to work on making it about as easy to see as possible. So if you forgive a bit of the creative camera work here, we'll do that. So we'll go into our trivia section next here, and we'll wrap up with that for tonight. And definitely, we'll hopefully do one here where, yeah, it won't be quite as late at night, so people don't have to tune in this late to see it. Of course, it'll be something that people can rewatch later, but we'll certainly get into that. Alrighty. Yeah, the roof number does look weird on the parked car. That was kind of strange. It's like it had it almost like a white number or something. So you got that too. I don't know if we had a lot of votes for trivia. I guess we see for wild card. I don't see anything really that's kind of leading up here that much. So we'll just do some wild card questions here. I know it's late for you guys, so we'll just do a couple and we'll wrap up here for the evening. Alrighty. There we go. Okay, first question of the evening, folks. How many Canadian provinces had hosted NASCAR events through 1998? We got a question for our friends to the north here. How many Canadian provinces had hosted NASCAR events through 1998? That's our first question. Bring that up there a little bit. And as you check that out, I'm going to check this out here. Alrighty. How many Canadian provinces had hosted NASCAR events through 1998? Yeah, kind of a tricky one. I assume it just means cup races. That would be probably the best guess on this one. This posted 17 minutes ago. I apologize if you guys are already tweeting this at me during the diecast segment, but Cup Tech is complete according to Pockrass, and there were no issues. So Chase Elliott is the winner, and Alex Bowman is your last place finisher. The Alex Bowman article coming either a little later tonight or sometime tomorrow, as it's now getting a bit later on this side here. Wow, yeah, everybody else completed 262 to 300 laps, except for Bowman. Again, very low attrition, much like what we had at Sears Point. So surprising there. Hope we get some more, these open teams to show up here. We do have William Saki that's going to be working the event at Road America next week. He and I are actually going to be co-writing the articles for the Xfinity and the Cup Series articles next week. So look forward to that here on the website for the Road America weekend. And yeah, that's going to be really cool coming up here. I know that's his home track up there, so that'll be interesting to find out. Again, you hear how many Canadian provinces had hosted NASCAR events through 1998. The answer is 1. The answer is 1. Age Gale 1718. You got the right one there. Thomas, thank you for ducking in. Oh, I'm so glad you appreciated the Mike Potter video. I was very happy to put that together, and I hope he's had a chance to see it there. I know I sent you the link, and I sent a few other people the link there too. And people seem really interested in the story. Certainly, the 1992 Daytona 500 start was a really enjoyable story to kind of go over there at the same time. And I really appreciated the pictures that Brian Hallman was able to contribute on that, because that really tied it all together. Some of these stories, it's so hard to kind of create some good visuals for it. I don't want to just put a bunch of stock footage in a video. I'd really like it to be directly relevant to it. But luckily, there was some really good content there on Mike, and I'm glad that came together. Wow, this is, I mean, I'm not going to ask this because everybody's going to know the answer, but look at this. This actually is asking on here, how many wins did JD McDuffie have in his 653 races in his career? It actually has that statistic on here. There's JD McDuffie is actually part of the Tiger Electronic one. Of course, the answer is 0 on that. Alrighty. Let's see. Next question here. The next question will actually be, what's known as the nose job in the NASCAR Winston Cup world? He absolutely loved it. Oh, that's so good. Thank you for letting me know, Thomas. Absolutely. What's known as the nose job in the NASCAR Winston Cup world? That is the next question. Yeah, that's kind of a vague question. I don't know. I'm not sure what it means on that. What is known as the nose job? It has nose job in quotes in the NASCAR Winston Cup world. I can think of a guess like with that, but I don't. Okay, I'm not sure if anybody's going to get this because it wasn't what I was thinking. I'm just looking at the answer here. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, bump and run, air vent. Yeah, I don't know. What is known as the nose job in the NASCAR Winston Cup world? After race brawl? Yeah, that could be it too. All these are fine answers. It could have easily been it. What's known as the nose job in the NASCAR Winston Cup world? Here's the answer. Cleaning your radiator off another car? That's a good one. The answer is erect front end. Erect front end. I guess it's literally saying like when you just take the nose of the car off. I was gonna guess putting the tape on the nose. I was thinking it was that. Like you're fine tuning that detail, but guess not. Let's see. Here we go. Here's a good Nashville question. What country music siren did Darrell Waltrip name a car after? What country music singer did Darrell Waltrip name a car after? Say denting in the nose of the car. Yep, yeah, Evan. Yeah, you did get it. Yeah, you got it right under the nose there. There you go. What country music singer? It says siren, but I'm going to say singer because it's less confusing. What country music singer did Daryl Waltrip name a car after? Yeah, I'll give you that one, Evan, for sure. What country music singer did Daryl Waltrip name a car after? All right, we got two guesses for Dolly Parton. Certainly, she had a role in the broadcast today, so that was pretty cool. Hank Williams Jr. Let's see. The answer is indeed Dolly Parton. Absolutely. Dolly Parton is the correct answer. Let's see. Come on. Let's get a good one here. Alrighty. We'll just do one more here for tonight because I know it's on the late side here. Last question for the evening here, folks. What auto was nearly half the 75 car field driving at the 1950 Southern 500? What auto was nearly half the 75 car field driving at the 1950 Southern 500? Don't look it up. Don't look it up. Go ahead and just guess. What auto, or I guess what manufacturer specifically, or model or make, or however you want to read it there, was nearly half the 75 car field driving at the 1950 Southern 500? All right, we guesses for Chevy and Olds and Hudson and Chevy. All right, we'll see. We'll see. What auto was nearly half the 75 car field driving at the 1950 Southern 500? Alrighty, here we go. Answer coming up. Nearly half the 1950 Southern 500 field was the Oldsmobile Rocket 88. The Oldsmobile Rocket 88 was nearly half the 1950 Southern 500 field. BB and Potato, you got it. You got Oldsmobile. Oh, Maserati 9, you went for the gold. You got Olds 88. Right on. There you go. Excellent. Excellent. All righty. Well, tell you what. Well, that will do it for the show this evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for the night crew here sticking along with the show here. Hopefully, our next show, well, I mean, Road America doesn't have lights, so ideally it'll be during the day and not too much later. But that will be our next show, which is going to be next Sunday after the conclusion of the Cup race. We'll talk about that event as well as the Xfinity Series. Again, big thanks to William Saki, who's going to be covering the action that weekend. I may not have the updates for the live tweets for the Saturday race. So we may have something planned that day there, but I do plan on doing that on Sunday. So we'll stick around with that and get some more updates for you guys there. And in the meantime, yes, the website is lastcar.info. The Patreon is patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. Of course, feel free to check out any other content here in the meantime. So other than that, you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll see you guys after the next race weekend. So take care, everyone.